Yes, beautiful people. Hello again. Hello and welcome to another edition of What is the Time? A podcast about personal sovereignty, celestial time, and the living where the getting is good. I am your boy, Zamboni. Your DJ for the affair where we'll be getting down and won't be coming up for air. We're going to figure it out loud at another time today. You know, the skies today are pretty rough. We've got the moon in Capricorn square to both malefics in Aries right now. And I, for one, am grumpy about it. So what I'm going to do today is take a contrarian stance against all the things you know and love. So get ready. It's going to get a little ranty today, probably. But we're going to see if I can come up with something interesting here. And if I can't, then too bad. That is what we've got going on today. I've been thinking about words, especially. I think about words all the time. I get lost in that space. But I think a lot about words that have come to mean, the difference between denotation and connotation is really important. And so denotation, you could think of denotation as like your dictionary definition. It's the thing that the word actually means. And then connotation, it could be like the set of values associated with that word that are not necessarily the meaning of the word itself. And I think that it's really important to at least be clear about our denotations and see if our connotations are worthy. You know, like, so the last time, a couple of times ago, whatever, I spent a bunch of time disambiguating value and quality. I sort of said that value is a representation of choices, whereas quality is a representation of the thing that is good, or we could think about it as, like I almost said quality. You should not use the word in your definition. The thing that is good or ethical or moral or something like that could be thought of as quality, or excellence is another way. When the, like, excellence, I think of excellence in artwork and stuff like that. Like, if you perform really well at your craft, then that could be seen as excellence and quality. And then if you do that really well but don't market it, then it won't get chosen, and so it won't be a very valuable product, even if it is a good product, right? So there's a lot of these words that have gotten linked up in ways that I think have become counterproductive. And so I'm here to disambiguate them, and let's see if there is something useful that can come from that. I'm not sure that I will arrive at something useful, but it's stuff that I've been thinking about for a while, so I'm going to go ahead and get it off my nipples. Let's see about it. So the first one that I'm going to come for here is freedom. Freedom is associated with good things. People love to talk about freedom, where I'm American, and Americans love freedom. And you know that as well we should. There's a lot of great stuff, especially like insofar as freedom is the antithesis of slavery. I think that I prefer freedom over slavery. This seems kind of obvious, but you know, like that's a real thing. That is a real thing that exists in the world. And so we got to be aware of that, even while I'm going to tear freedom down a little bit here. The reason why I would do that is because I consider myself an extremely free person. And by extreme, I mean the denotative definition of that, like at the edge of the spectrum. I'm on the extreme of freedom. I am about as free as any human has ever been in the world. in the history of time. And what I have come to find is that this might not actually be so desirable a position. I sometimes think about The Life of Pi. I think the author of that book is Jan Martel, is that right? I've seen that movie, or I actually haven't seen the movie, but I talk to people about it a lot, and they frequently haven't read the book, but they talk about the movie. I guess the movie is supposed to be really good, so good on you if you have seen the movie. I've read the book maybe 6 times or something like that. It's real good. I like it a lot. And something about the image of a kid on a lifeboat with a tiger really resonates with me. I really like that image a lot. Something about it really stirs something in me. It feels resonant in some kind of meaningful way. And I like it a lot. All right, so let's think about freedom and liberation. Liberation just means moving toward freedom, right? So I associate Uranus with liberation. I don't think that anyone would categorize Uranus as a benefic. I don't think anyone has ever tried to do that. And I don't think that it would make sense to do that. Uranus's job is to upset things. It is to bring surprises and unexpected stuff. And even when surprises turn out really good, because they move you in a direction that they get you out of whatever terrible circumstance it was, and it moves you into something that's way better and stuff like that. Humans generally do not like surprises. We typically do not like unexpected things. We don't like change very much. We would prefer to just do the same thing over and over. It's the kind of, the devil situation where if you know that you're in a bad situation, but to get yourself out of that position, you have to change what you're doing, then the likelihood that you do that and actually get out of the thing that holds you back is pretty low relative to the probability that you just keep on doing the thing that you do because it's the thing that you know how to do. It's where your habits are and stuff like that. There's a very high probability of sticking with your habits, and it's what humans tend to prefer to do. This is, again, back to this difference between value, which is the choice that you make, versus quality, which is the thing that would be best. So Uranus being the one that strongly encourages changes, especially sudden changes, surprises, disruptions. Upset is a really good one. Upset means to flip the thing over, to turn it upside down. And that can be really liberating and freeing. Frederick Douglass is one of my favorite examples of this. I really like Frederick Douglass for lots of reasons. But, so Frederick Douglass is, we don't have a good astrology chart for him. We don't even have a date of birth for him. We have a time period that it could, there's a month or something like that where we think that Frederick Douglass was born around that time, but there is no surviving documentation. He didn't know himself what day he was born, and so he just had to start when he finally got free and started having legal documentation and stuff. He just made a bunch of shit up. He was like, I think I'm about this old. The whole thing is very ambiguous, and so the idea of having a timed chart for him or something like that is completely absurd. That's not happening. But when he got free, when he made his escape from the plantation, you got to remember that Frederick Douglass was born into slavery and then stopped being a slave at a certain time. Well, that time is known. He gives us the time he gives us the day. I don't think that he gives us a time exactly, but it's sunrise on that day, and so it's pretty simple to just find when the ship would be leaving, because he made his escape by stowing away on a ship. He pretended to be working on the ship and then just got on the ship and sailed away from the plantation and got free that way. And so you can just look and be like, okay, when or would a ship have been sailing out this day, and then just like look it up. So, and I really like that because that shows us that there was a full moon in Pisces that day. Pisces being the sea, the ocean, and then there was a full moon conjunct Uranus that day. And so Uranus was in Pisces at that time, and so this shows us that Uranus is well associated with getting free. Now, the thing about that is, okay, so he sails to New York, right? And so he gets off the ship, and then he's in New York, and it's the thing about Uranus is a lot of times, or the thing about getting free is a lot of times it's out of the frying pan and into the fire. You know, like it's this sense that it's really terrible where I am. I got to get out of here. And then you get out and you're like, oh, this is worse. Because now he doesn't have any of the shelter or security that he used to have. You know, that's the devil you know. At very least, if you're hanging out with the devil you know, there is security in that. You know how that story goes. You can do the same thing over and over. It's predictable. You don't know. So he's in a foreign city. He doesn't know how to get around. He is clearly an escaped slave. And New York City in that moment is not the sort of, you know, like we can think of like liberal coastal elites now and stuff like that. That's not how New York City is in that moment. In, what is this, 1840 or something like that? I haven't looked it up in a while. I looked up I actually looked this up in 2020 when Uranus was in Taurus. We had a full moon conjunct Uranus in Taurus, and I did a whole thing about it then. But and that was a time when I was like reading all this Frederick Douglass. Also, he names it in his last. He's got 3 autobiographies, and the last one is the longest and it's the best. There's a really great audiobook that is super worth going through, where there's a classically trained performer who reads the book, and there's some songs and stuff, and he sings the songs, and like all of it is really great. It's a really amazing performance, but also the writing is really amazing, and there's a bunch of great there's a bunch of great stories in it, and it's at the end of his life where he just kind of doesn't give a shit anymore, and so he's spilling all the tea in ways that would probably be incriminating earlier in his life, and he's just saying shit at this point. He's like, a bunch of these people are dead, and what are you gonna do? You're gonna come for me now? Like, I just, fuck it, here it goes. And he just spills all the stuff. Like, one of the things that I think is hilarious in that book is he talks about John Brown. So John Brown is this white man who ran a raid to try to free the slaves, and he occupies some territory for a minute and then ultimately dies in the battle, and it ends up being this like cultural spark where everybody gets really inspired by it, even though this John Brown stand doesn't actually do the thing. It sort of creates a spark all the same, and so then anyone who is associated with John Brown is like being investigated and that sort of stuff. And so Frederick Douglass was associated with John Brown at that time, and so they start to investigate him, and Frederick Douglass says the most gangster shit I've ever heard. It's great. He's like, listen, I was not involved in John Brown's raid. You know why I wasn't involved? He told me he was gonna do it. I told him the shit wasn't gonna work. I told him not to do it. I was not involved. And I don't know if they didn't have conspiracy laws at that time. I don't know. He's just openly admitting the shit. He wrote it in a fucking newspaper. Like, there's a whole article about it and everything. It's great. It's amazing. I really like it a lot. But anyway, so in that text, he gives us the exact date of his departure out of slavery, and it turns out to be a full moon in Pisces conjunct Uranus. And so Uranus is this planet of liberation, of breaking the chains, breakups, breakdowns, break through, break free. Is a great way to think about Uranus. I frequently delineate Uranus in people's charts, like an important Uranus transit will be something that generally pulls you toward genuine authenticity in some kind of way. And so the thing about Frederick Douglass is that so early in his life, he is disallowed from reading because it's said that it's going to spoil him. And in fact, it does. He gets a little bit of knowledge in his head, and he's like, yo, fuck this. I'm at least as smart and as valuable as everyone else is. And by valuable here, really what we're talking about is quality. I'm at least as high quality as everyone else around me, but I'm in the subjugated position. I don't have control of over my own life. I'm not autonomous. This is some bullshit. I hate this the most. And so he takes that, and it's like in his heart, it's really deeply true, genuine, and authentic in his heart that he feels this way. And so he gets out of there, and he breaks the chains. He breaks himself free. He gets free, and then he makes it to New York City, and there's slave catchers all over the street. He is clearly a fugitive slave. He doesn't have shit. He has rags on his body, and he doesn't have any shelter. He doesn't have anywhere to go. He doesn't have any friends. He is just in the city, effectively asking to be beaten and captured and brought back into slavery. So it actually is very similar to the idea in Exodus, where the Hebrews are in slavery, and then Moses comes and he does the whole let my people go thing, and then they get out, and then they wander around the desert for 40 fucking years. That's 2 generations. They're just in the desert wandering around. These whole lives happen in the desert. They're wandering around. They don't have any direction. They don't know where they're going. They're supposed to be headed for the promised land, but like, where is this promised land, nigga? Where the fuck are we supposed to be going? Aren't you the guy who's supposed to be talking to God? What the fuck, my man? So, it's exactly like that in most of the time. Like, that's one of the lessons that story teaches, is that you break free from tyranny, and then you have all the responsibility, and you've never had this responsibility before, and you suck at it. So now shit sucks in your life. You don't know how to get your own shelter or do any of the, like, all of the infrastructure that it takes to be a person in the world. You necessarily must know people. And, I actually am here for a certain amount of individualism. In fact, Frederick Douglass is the author of a famous talk called The Self-Made Man. He's like the prime example of the self-made man who starts in slavery and then breaks himself free and then has to go and do his whole life and figures out how to do it and becomes reasonably wealthy. And the fucking American dream, you're like, you want the American dream? This guy did the American dream totally. And so I'm here for a certain amount of rugged individualism and stuff like that. But the fact is that you don't survive as a human without other people around. I don't care if you're a self-made man or how much help you did or did not have. The fact is that we do not live except by living in community. And I say that as somebody who, as I mentioned, I'm very free. I am out here very it feels kind of isolating to me a lot of times. I don't have roommates, for example. That's one of my favorite ways to think about it. I don't have roommates, and that's extremely free. I can be naked. I could be naked right now. You wouldn't know. I could be naked in my living room at 3 p.m. and no one cares. I'm not in anyone's way. I can do what I want because I pay the rent here, right? But that doesn't mean that I'm not dependent on other people. I'm dependent on other people to make sure that the water infrastructure works, that the fire and heating infrastructure works, that I can cook things properly. I'm necessarily dependent on grocery stores and all that sort of stuff. So even though I live this super individualistic life, I still am necessarily connected to other people, and without those other people, I would die fairly immediately. This is the case for the whole human condition. We aren't like tigers, or jaguars, where you live your whole life alone and that is what it is. We are necessarily in community with other people at all times. And so anyway, this is to say that Frederick Douglass on Escape does not have any of that infrastructure. And in fact, all of the people that he sees around him, including the black ones, are enemies, because maybe some of them are going to snitch to slave catchers. Maybe all of them are put into danger by his presence. So even if they are sympathetic to his cause, then even the black folks who are the most likely to be sympathetic toward him are themselves put into danger because there's laws on the books at this time also where free people, also known as white people in the law, are required, in the event of finding a fugitive slave, they are required to capture that person and send them back. Now, this is kind of like the way that Saturn and Aries right now shows us that pirate season is real. How enforceable is this law really? And what they what they discover on the passage of that law is that this is completely unenforceable, and it is what are you gonna do? You're gonna be mad at somebody that they saw, get out of my fucking face, dude. I'm busy. I got a job to do. You know what I mean? So it doesn't work that well. The law isn't super effective. However, if you are a free black person in New York City and you find a fugitive slave, you know what the law is, and this is not a good situation for you, right? So his shit is fucked up, and that is the whole thing about liberation, is that there's a trickiness to it. Okay, so this gets me back to The Life of Pi. I really like The Life of Pi. So it's this story about a kid who is in India. His parents run a zoo, and they're going to move to Canada. And so they pack up the whole zoo on a ship, and then the ship sinks, and everybody dies except for him and a tiger. And he and the tiger make it onto the lifeboat, and they are stranded in the middle of the ocean, and they gotta not die. And so this feeling of being stranded in the middle of the ocean, it is completely untethered, and for that reason, very free. However, this kind of complete extreme freedom is not desirable. It's not the thing that you want. What we come to notice in this is that constraints make the meaning. When there's no constraints, you just are out here. You can think about like a game, like a video game where there's nothing to do. You're just out. You're just here in this world, and you are in the world, and so you can go and do stuff in the world, but why do any of the stuff? There's nothing. If there's nothing to do, if there's not a job to perform or an action or something like that, then why do anything? Why play this game at all? It is the constraints that provide the meaning in the first place. So if you don't have any of those constraints, then there is no meaning. And this is what we find about games kind of generally, is that, and I think it's good to think of life as a game. A game is when you create some constraints that point toward a goal, and then you put yourself through the task of trying to achieve that goal. That's what the game is. That's what a game always is. And so the constraints can be artificial, and in fact are artificial like most of the time, unless we think of life itself as being a game. I've been thinking that through recently. I haven't come to a real conclusion about it, because the arbitrary nature seems to be important to the way that games function. So the idea there is like, so imagine, and this is not my example, this is C.T. Nguyen has this example, but he's like, so imagine that you are climbing up a mountain, and then you are climbing up a mountain, and there are two reasons that you could be climbing up this mountain. One is because at the top of the mountain there is a special magic herb that is going to cure your terminal condition. And then or another reason why you might be doing it is because you're a mountain climber and you like climbing mountains. So if someone comes by with a helicopter and is like, hey, I can bring you to the top, if your goal is to get the magic herb on the top of the mountain, then you take that helicopter ride immediately, because you're like, yeah, fuck this. What I'm trying to do is not climb. What I'm trying to do is get to the herb. Whereas if the whole game is the climb, then you refuse the helicopter ride, because what you're doing is climbing. The point is to be climbing. So that shows us that the point of the game is to play. And this, I think, is pretty true about the way that societies function in general. Like, we want to be connected to others, and so we do stuff along with other people, and the point is to do stuff with people. The point is not necessarily to finish the job so that we can stop being with the other people. The point is the being with other people and living. The point of playing the game of life is to play, is to live. And so you have to play the game in such a way as to keep the game going, to keep people wanting to play with you and this kind of stuff, right? So if you are, why am I talking about games? If you're trying to play the game and life, where am I going with this? Liberation, right? So if you're out in the middle of the ocean all by yourself, then you don't have those constraints that give you the meaning, and that is a worse condition than having constraints that hold you in a narrow place. Even though the narrow place is uncomfortable, navigating that discomfort and playing the game through those constraints are so meaningful that they are ultimately a higher quality condition than complete freedom is. This is something that I don't think is well recognized by our society in general. And so in the pursuit of freedom, there is a sense of chaotic deconstruction. Like, you can just deconstruct everything until you don't have any constructions anymore, and then, or structures anymore, or Saturn stuff, Saturn boundaries, obstacles, walls, structures, infrastructures, all that sort of stuff, constraints. If you undo all of those, then the idea is that we will be more free and therefore happier or something like that, because we don't have those constraints. But we find that the constraints give us meaning. And so how do we play with that. Now, I'm not saying that slavery is a better condition than freedom. As I mentioned at the top, I do believe that freedom is a better condition than slavery. However, what if we didn't have to live in a binary extreme about that, and rather could notice that freedom is cool until it's not, and constraint is also cool until it's not? What if we stopped treating freedom like an absolute good and started thinking about good as participating in freedom, but not exclusively? All right, cool. Let's stay on theme America here. And the next one that I want to deal with here is democracy. Democracy is another word that is associated with good. If you say democracy in polite company, then everyone's going to nod their head and be like, yes, yes, democracy, we love democracy. And again, it's a little like freedom. Like, I'm here for it most of the time, but man, we should be able to acknowledge that it sucks a lot of the time in a lot of ways also. One of the things that Brian put me on to, I don't know, a few months back at this point, I guess, year or something. I guess it was probably around election time, that a voter democracy is some bullshit. It is literally a popularity contest. And one of the things that I pointed out with the whole value versus quality thing is that we frequently choose things that are not very good. That's why a phenomenon like, say, I've heard people talk about Game of Thrones this way. I haven't actually seen Game of Thrones. I don't really care about it that much, but I've heard people say that Game of Thrones is excellent, that it is an excellent piece. It's a high quality piece, and was also the single most important TV show on the air at that time. Or I think about Bad Bunny this way. Bad Bunny is such excellent music, and also the most popular music in the world right now. It is a rare condition that we choose the thing that is most excellent, that what we choose to put on the pedestal of attention is also the highest quality thing. That is a rare condition. For the most part, we choose something that is middling to bad. As a voter democracy, we can notice that we have a really difficult time distinguishing between politicians and TV stars or movie stars. And of course we do. They're both similar figures. There's a certain, when you're making information intuitive in your body, which is the only way that you can actually make it functional or useful in your real life, then it's got to be in the feeling space and in the abstract symbol, metaphor, dream place. And TV stars and politicians both live in the same symbolic, metaphorical space. And so it makes total sense that we would not distinguish them properly in I want to call it discrete space. Like, we don't distinguish between TV stars and politicians that good because they are effectively the same thing. They're figureheads who do a lot of talking, and we watch them. They take up the spotlight. They're the center of attention and stuff like that. That's kind of the main thing that is. And so if we're thinking about a voter democracy prioritizes, it's a popularity contest. So the whole thing is about being the most popular. And so I don't know that is the road to best outcomes. We know for a fact that it is not, for the most part. Like, it's a rare instance where we get a Bad Bunny or Game of Thrones or whatever. Most of the time, I think that there's a wide gulf between Bad Bunny and Kesha, and like, no shade on Kesha, like, shout out to her ability to do something that I am clearly incapable of doing, which is making music that people will really vibe with and be willing to pay a lot of money for. Like, I have been completely incapable of doing that, and if I could get somebody to pay some money for my music, I would do it. But I can't, so I make the music that I make instead. So shout out to Kesha for being dope. Also, I don't think that Kesha's music is the most excellent thing that our culture can produce. And so, but I think we, and like, listen, I am working very hard these days to not be judgmental. I spend a lot of time listening to the radio these days and being like, you know what? They are doing a music, and they know how to write these songs. Like, I was listening, it just became May. It's early May right now, and so I went back and listened to It's Gonna Be May, and as a pop song, that shit goes so hard. It does everything you want it to do. It's so like dated. It's in its moment in history, but it's just giving you the thing. Pop songs work because of their technical capacity. If you run these techniques down, then it'll make you feel a way that you want to feel when you're listening to pop music. And it does that thing marvelously. So I'm really trying to come at things from a non-judgmental place and just listen to it and be like, oh, okay, so I guess they're going to do a music now, or they're going to do an art now, whatever thing it is that I'm listening to. But I think you understand. I don't think I have to caveat this anymore. I think you know what the fuck I'm talking about. How we don't typically choose the most excellent thing. We just choose the most, choice? The thing I don't even know that we like it the most. That's the thing. The thing that is least offensive? Something like that. I don't know what it is, but I do know that I don't think it's the highest quality thing. I think about this a lot because I tend to, from an economic perspective, I tend to be a pretty strong free market kind of guy, because I don't think that there is anything more democratic than a free market. Now, the reason for that is, and so here's, like, I do think that democracy is good in the sense that it gives people a certain amount of autonomy. It is not autocratic, which is to say that it is like a single tyrant, a dictator, totalitarianly, just sort of like unilaterally making decisions for people who don't get to. It's the taxation without representation thing, you know what I mean? Like, we should have representation in how the laws get passed, because these laws affect me, so I should have a voice in that situation, right? So I do like democracy for that, and I think that free markets are the most democratic mechanism that we have. Maybe there's something else that could exist, but free markets. So the thing about markets is that the pricing mechanism is, it shows you what's genuinely valuable. It shows you what people genuinely will choose. So, and it always defers to the legitimate experts in that field. So that's not to say the people who have the degrees and the credentials and the and who look good on paper and the resumes and stuff like that. Those aren't the people who make the decisions. The people who make the decisions are paying customers. So the people who actually want and use the thing. So if you are a rural farmer in the middle of Wisconsin, let's say, then you don't have a lot of sway when it comes to coastal elites who have most of the political power, right? They just don't give a fuck what you think that much. But you know who cares what you think? Tractor companies. People, because you run a farm and you buy tractors, and you buy the tractors that are the best ones for you, and you don't buy the tractors that are not the best ones for you. So by spending your dollars in the way that you spend them, you inform the marketplace what you want and need, and they have to come to you about that. And so it's not about some suit somewhere said that this is going to be the thing that is going to work. It's the people who actually use the thing, the actual experts who make the decisions about what is going to rise to the top of a certain field or industry or whatever. That is true democracy, because it sidesteps all of the bureaucratic red tape and it goes straight to the actual people on the ground. So the actual people are the ones who you want to be represented by a democracy. And so the free market is the single most democratic system that can possibly exist. Show me something else. Show me something that is more democratic than that. My eyes are open. My ears are open for it. But I haven't seen anything yet that is more democratic than that. Now, and this is more democratic than a voter democracy because half of the electorate doesn't even show up, or more than half. I think it's something like 70% or something like that. People don't show up to vote in the first place. There's all these the districts are rigged, and the voting day happens in the middle of the day on Tuesday. So maybe you just didn't even get out of your job in order to go stand in this fucking line and whatever, you know. There's not to mention all of the different ways that voter suppression happens, and you can only vote for the choices that are available to you, whereas in a free market space, you have the option to invent a thing and then put it onto the marketplace. There is, so it is more, the free market is more democratic than a voter democracy is. And so the thing that Brian put me onto was the idea of a lottery. So this gets the sort of elites out of a place where they're pushing each other around and seeing who can tell the best, most compelling stories in front of a camera and bright lights and get the votes. It sort of sidesteps that, and if there's a lottery, like if we treat it like it's jury duty, where everybody who's, registered to vote or whatever, everybody who is eligible is just in this lottery, and then anybody can just fuck around and be the president for a couple of years, then like that is so true to democracy. Like you get the real people in charge that way, and that means that the power play doesn't happen in that space anymore. I'm not sure that actually yields better outcomes. I haven't run through where I think the incentives would go there. So power plays are still going to happen, and like it's in our nature to game systems. So I haven't thought through how that system would then be gamed. My guess is the real power would function in the unelected positions, the sort of, people call it the deep state now. Sometimes the idea that, a lot of people don't shift when the administration changes, like the president will change and then the cabinet will change and stuff like that. But like a lot of the same people still work in the White House or still work in the Pentagon or like these kinds of places. You know what I mean? People who have their 9 to 5s there and who really like keep the thing running smoothly between administrations and stuff like that. Those people could be considered the deep state because they are unelected people who have their own objectives and motives, and stuff happens. Like there's a power play to be had there. So my guess is that in the event that we treated it as a lottery instead of a voter democracy, then that's where the power would go. But I haven't thought that through in any deep kind of way because I don't think that this is a legitimate option. I don't think that it's a thing that is on the table for us. And so I don't really think it through very deeply because I don't have time like that. But I do sometimes think about, so the free market is more democratic than a voter democracy, potentially more democratic than a lottery as well, because there's more, you could call it consent involved. And there's more like inside innovation, because like if you treat a powerful political position as the same way that you treat jury duty or something like that, then it's like, all right, so the play is almost to evade jury duty. You know what I mean? Like, you don't want that shit. You start being like, yo, I got a job that you're gonna pay me $7 an hour, dude. I got bills to pay. What the fuck, like that. So, and then, so I would think that the power would be outside of that, and I haven't thought that through. I don't know. Free markets, though, are not always the best play because, all right, so the best example is that I can think of is utilities, right? So water is my favorite example of this. Electricity, almost. So the idea with free markets is that lots of different companies compete for market share. And in that competition, then things become a higher quality and lower price. Those are the main vectors on which competition is waged, is held, performed. So, and this is true, right? This is companies get more efficient in order to undercut the other guys and in order to make more money. And there's great incentive to do that because that's where their money is coming from. And the goal is to get rich, and because being rich is better than being poor. And I don't care if money doesn't buy me love or happiness or meaning or anything like that. It does buy me food and luxury, and those things are better than not having food and luxury. So let me deal with this lack of meaning from a recliner rather than dealing with a lack of meaning from a hospital bed that I can't afford, from under the shackles of debt, because you can live a meaningless life in either of those places. May as well be comfortable and meaningless. So the incentive is in the place where you get all this money, right? So monopolies are bad news, and so you want the competition, except in a situation where you're like looking at water management, right? So if you're looking at water management, then there's a couple of things that we need to think about. First is it's going to be very cheap for companies to just throw toxic waste into the waterways. And so the whole public starts to die as a result of that. Smog was a big deal in the 70s before California. It was really the work of Californian environmental agencies that cleaned air quality up the world over, because car companies, in order to sell to California buyers, which were like there was enough spending power in California that it made it worth it for the car manufacturers to just make their cars compliant with those regulations, and then everybody all over the world could buy that car. So they would do that, and everybody's air quality got better as a result of that. You know, so that's an important way to think about how useful and effective markets can be. But also, regulation is going to be important at some point, right? So, am I about to make a pro-state argument? Shit's wild. I didn't know that this was where I was going to go in my life. I got to tell you that. But, you know, insofar as the state is the entity which has the monopoly on violence. Is that Kropotkin? Is that who said that? I don't actually know. But that is a good way of conceptualizing the state. The state is the one who they can hit you and you can't hit back. And so if the state says you got to do a thing, then you got to do that thing. And if you don't do it, then they can hit you, and then you can't hit back because they have the monopoly on violence, right? And so they have this power to create regulations that can then improve the commons. Like, the tragedy of the commons is what the free markets run into immediately. And so you got to regulate against that. And then also the other thing about the tragedy of the commons that is worth thinking about in the context of free markets is that, so if you have, let's say that you don't have a single water company, but rather you have many water companies which are in competition with one another, and therefore the quality of things should be going up and the price of things should be going down, right? Well, you have to build all of this infrastructure. Like, you need a bunch of pipes to pipe the water around. And then if you're doing that and you're not doing it in a singular framework, then that means you need lots of different pipes pumping water. So then you end up extracting more water from the reserve, whatever it is, if it's an aquifer or if it's a river of some sort or something like this. Like, you end up taking more water from that, and you end up digging up a whole bunch more earth because of it, so that you can put your pipes in, and then your pipes are conflicting with each other, they're getting in each other's way and stuff like that. Like, it causes all these other logistical problems that are such a problem that it's better for us to have a regulated monopoly than it is to have many companies competing with each other. The same could be said about electricity. Electricity is not quite the same, but it's you still run into the same problem of all, like, having to harvest all of these resources in order to create the electricity in the first place. Wires have to, then there have to be all these extra wires around, and like, how much of that do you want? And then you got to look at copper extraction and shit like that. Like, this is not necessarily it's not necessarily better in every case to have an open and free market, because environmental regulations can be helpful, because there are certain instances in which a regulated monopoly outperforms a competitive landscape in the sense of actually creating a higher quality of life, rather than simply measuring quality of life on lower price and quality of product. So a valuable product doesn't always give you your highest quality of life. again, value and quality are usefully distinguished here. So there's this sense that a democracy is amazing because it gives the power to the people, but we also have to recognize that people will make terrible choices a lot. They'll prefer terrible things, such as pouring toxic nuclear waste into the water so that everyone dies in the next 20 years, you know? Like, it's very short-sighted. Democracy is extremely short-sighted. And as a result, you know, like, think about the longevity of China, for example. China has never really been a real voter democracy, but the empires that we associate with China and the longevity of China that go back thousands of years. You know, the United States goes back 250 years. China goes back thousands of years. And that shit was autocratic the whole time. So there's something short-sighted about democracy that I think that is also associated with the free markets and everything, that I think is a problem that needs to be contended with. Now, I still am on the team of the free market for the most part. I'm on team democracy for the most part. But it's going to be important to think with some mitigations here in some kind of way, because it's not as cut and dried as that. What if we stopped thinking about democracy as an absolute good and started thinking with some of the nuance with that? If you start thinking with nuance of that, does everything just turn autocratic and totalitarian immediately, and you just lose grip of any democracy? I think that that's a real danger, but too bad. But I made the points that I made. Let's see here. All right, so let's keep going on the train here. I'm on a roll. And these words are all in a vein. They're all they sort of hang together here. So we're gonna keep going on them. I also have been thinking about the word equality and how it is not, like, we think of equality as being this absolute good. And I don't think that it is the absolute good that it is billed as. And this is a real problem. It is causing real problems that we need to think better thoughts about. We need to find a way out of that. And in order to do that, we need to stop thinking of equality as this absolute good. So, equality is sameness. So 2 plus 2 equals 4. Because if you have 2 and you have another 2, then that is the same as having 4. They are the same thing. 2 and 2 equals 4. Because 2 plus 2 is the same as 4. So equality gets this big treatment of absolute good because largely for civil rights. You know, it's this idea that all men should be equal under the law. And like maybe we should put women in there also. And so all women should be, all men and women should be, or all persons, let's say, should be equal under the law. And that sounds great. And I'm here for that. I think, am I here for that? That's the question here, right? So the first thing that I'll think with here, should we do race or gender first? Let's go gender first since we're already there. So I am not sure that men and women should be treated equally under the law. Because they are not the same. And so to think with sameness is to immediately go off track. I think that there is a better model for sex and gender relations if we use complementarity rather than equality. Equality is sameness. This is androgyny. This is everybody is androgynous. And like, if you want to be androgynous, cool, I love that for you. Like, live your life. But the idea that all people are or ought to be androgynous, that's an insane prospect that I think that even genderqueer people would be like, yeah, that's not that's not realistic. That doesn't make any real sense, you know? So instead, what we have is something like a polar spectrum, right? Let's think with complementarity for a second. Let's not think about gender. Let's just think about the idea of complementarity generally, right? There are two kinds of people in the world. There are people who like splitting the world into dichotomies and those who don't. The people who don't will frequently, the way that they'll get around the dichotomy is they'll speak to its falseness and speak to the inherent truth of absolute unity, which is in fact true. That is a necessary thing that we have to learn about the world, is that it's all connected. We all are the one thing. I like to think about how everyone on the earth is a unit. I think of myself as a cell in the body of the earth, right? I can think of myself as a cell in the organ that is humanity, which is an organ in the wider body of the earth, right? And then you could be like, okay, well, the earth is probably a cell in the body of some larger organism, the solar system, or maybe it goes beyond that. My eyes get a little bit squinty at that point. I don't have a good concept of what goes on at that scale. And then you could go in the other direction also. Like, so I am a cell in the body of the earth. Well, I have cells in my body, and my cells have component parts which are smaller and smaller and smaller and all that, right? And it goes on in forever in all directions. But all of that is unified. Even if you wanted to say that like there's a multiverse or something like that, then you could just be like, okay, well, the set of multiverses is unified in the greater sum of what the cosmos am, you know? So and that's great. I love that. You know, that's true. But if all you can talk about is the unity of things, then it's extremely useless. You can't do shit with that. You can't point at any particular part of the cosmos without dividing it. And so you need to be able to divide it. And the most basic division that you can do is you can put a line down the middle and have this one versus that one, right? And the thing that my favorite way of doing that is into yin and yang, because it's not a straight line down the middle, it's a curvy line down the middle, and then there is a dot of each in the other one. So the yin has a yang dot in it, and the yang has a yin dot in it, and each of them are continually turning into the other one. And so there's something there that resists the linear spectrum pole situation, because it's all curvy, it's not a straight line. And we could think of the whole world as existing in this dynamic tension of opposites. That's in fact how I teach astrology also. And if you want to learn astrology and you want to learn how to do symbols and all this sort of stuff, you can go to sambodyfunk.com. You can learn in astrology from the ground up the fundamentals of astrology and have a lovely time there. But the way that I teach the astrology is as pairs of opposites. That's how I found that I learned the zodiac, for example, is that Cancer is opposite to Capricorn. And so you can learn a lot about Cancer and Capricorn by knowing that Capricorn gets its identity from being not Cancer, and Cancer gets its identity from being not Capricorn, and they exist on an axis. And then there are 6 of those axes, which are the signs. But then we can also see, okay, so that shows you that Moon rules Cancer, and Saturn rules Capricorn. And so there's something about the opposites there, that Moon can be meaningfully opposed to Saturn. And then you can also notice that Aquarius and Leo do that. And so Saturn can be meaningfully opposed to the Sun. And so then you can be like, okay, well, so Saturn can be meaningfully opposed to luminaries. So the luminaries, they shine the light, and then Saturn is known to be dusky and dark and that sort of thing, right? Saturn is associated with death, luminaries are associated with life, all that sort of stuff, right? So we can understand how the world works by understanding the dynamic tension of opposites, not just the tension of opposites, but the dynamic tension of opposites, because everything is always consistently in motion, moving, changing at all times. That's what makes astrology so elegant. It's what makes the yin-yang Tai Chi symbol so elegant as a descriptor of the entire world, because that dynamic tension of opposites, where they are consistently moving and consistently turning into one another, shows us the true reality of the world. So you can think about like day and night are a really good example of this. So the daytime is when the sun is up and it's really light outside and your diurnal creatures are out, and we go around and we're very active when we do the stuff, and look at all that. And then it turns into nighttime. And so it's not a clean transition of, it's not like you flip a switch and the light goes away. It goes through a process of then turning into night, and then your diurnal creatures go to bed. Now your nocturnal creatures get up, and now they're all active and out here experiencing the world and doing their things and stuff. And it's cooler and it's dark, and everything is opposite from the daytime, and then it feeds back into the daytime. Then it's daytime again, and so it goes through that pattern at all times, right? And so night and day are not equal to one another because they are not the same thing. They happen for equal periods of time. That is to say, in the final analysis of all of total time, we have equal day and night in totality. Even though there are periods, like in the wintertime, there's more night than there is day, and in the summertime there's more night, or there's more day than there is night. But that shifts back and forth again and again, such that it averages out to exactly equal. So they are equal amount of time, but equal refers there to the amount of time and not the quality, the way that day and night are. Day and night are different things, and in fact, they're both necessary. One of the things that I learned when I came back from Costa Rica, I lived in Costa Rica on the equator for a little over half a year, and so because it's on the equator, it doesn't the difference between winter and summer in terms of day length is not very dramatic. And so I effectively, throughout the whole time there, just had a 12-hour day and a 12-hour night. And it was great. It was amazing. Oh my God, it was so good. And then when I came back, it was to North America. I live at, what is it, like 40 degrees north or something like that. So it's not as dramatic as some folks, like in Canada or Alaska or something like that. But the days get pretty long in the summertime, and I came back and it was summer, and I was like, these days are so long. How am I supposed to rest like this? Like, what the fuck, you guys? So it was interesting to have that, because I'd up to that point, I had only lived at about that difference. I lived in Argentina for a while, but it actually was just kind of flipped. It was about the same distance from the equator, just on the other side. But it was the only time that, when I lived in Costa Rica, was the only time that I had that kind of equal balance. And man, it was great. But what I learned from coming back was that each of them are different and important. Like before that, I used to be like, oh man, I just love when the days are so long in summer, and I hate when the days are so short in winter, because I want to be happy in the sunshine and all that. And when I came back, I figured out that the darkness is as important as the light is. So it's not because they are the same. They are not equal. They are equally valuable. So yeah, that equal points to valuable or good or quality, rather than equally same. Like day and night are not equal. They're different things. Another way to think about this, I like to think about left and right a lot of times, like the left side is different from the right side. The first thing that you can do there is just notice that even though they are almost the same, they are mirror images of one another. And so, like, try putting your shoes on the wrong feet, for example. You know what I mean? You notice that shit immediately. Unless you're a baby and you think that it's going to be all fine, but, like, that shit's not going to work, Playboy. Like, you got to switch them around. You're going to be more comfortable because your feet are different shapes. They're the same, but they're different, right? Or, so I'm right hand dominant, right? That means that I am more powerful and more precise with the right side than I am with the left. But that doesn't mean that I need one more than I need the other. I need them both. If I'm ever going to perform an action, then really what happens here is I've got two things going on. I've got the right hand, which does the thing, and then the left hand stabilizes the thing that I'm trying to do. So if I've got like a hammer and nail, for example, then hammer goes in the right side because I am more powerful and more precise. I'm more likely to hit the target that I'm aiming for with that right side. I'm more likely to not crush my fucking fingers because my right hand is more precise and more powerful. But I need my left hand to hold the nail. The nail's job is to be in that spot, and my left hand's job is to keep it right there. You stay right there. By doing that, I am able to perform this task, which is nailing the thing to the thing, right? Putting the nail in. Because one side did the thing and the other side stabilized it. Or you could think about a ratchet and crank, right? One hand is going to hold the thing in place, and the other side is going to actually perform the ratcheting function. You know what I mean? That is always the way that it is. Anytime a task takes two hands, even I think that I can carry more. I can carry more than twice what I can carry on my right side by using both hands. There's a synergy to them that makes it more possible for me to do the jobs that I need to do, for me to play the game, we could say, to keep the thing in motion, to keep playing the game. I can do all that stuff that it takes to do that more effectively with both hands. I would not be as effective with two right hands as I am with a right and a left. And the only way that I know that is because evolution gave me a right and a left and not two rights. If two rights would have been more effective, then you can bet that evolution would have given me two rights. So, complementarity is a better way of thinking with two things that are both necessary but also are different. They are different things, and therefore should be treated differently. They should be put toward different tasks. My left hand isn't as good at doing right hand things, and so I give it left hand things to do instead of giving it right hand things to do. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't work out my left hand and that I don't, if I'm playing the piano, I need to be able to play scales on both sides and stuff like that, But, and those are, it's because I still need to do hand things, right? On either side. But, like, if I'm writing something, there's no reason for me to try to hold the paper steady with my right hand and write with the left hand. I found that my right hand doesn't even know how to hold the paper steady. Like, it's fucking weird that it doesn't know how to do that job in the same way that the left hand is like, I got this, bro. We're just gonna hold this right here. And my left hand knows how to do left hand things in a way that the right hand doesn't, right? So there's a specialization of labor here that helps me to get jobs done, right? All right, so equality is not the move, but rather complementarity. So if we move this back into gender space, then I don't know that I want them to be equal under the law. I don't know that I want genders to be equal under the law because they are different things. Think, for example, about murder. Let's go with murder because it's pretty unambiguous. For the most part, people feel like murder is a bad thing and should be punishable by law, right? So we can debate what the punishment should be and under what conditions and stuff like that. But for the most part, we're going to be pretty unified on that one. Like everybody's going to think that murder should be punishable by the law and is generally a wrong thing to do. Okay, cool. So imagine a man who has murdered someone. Okay, you've got an image in your head, right? Now, imagine a woman who has murdered someone. Shit feels different, right? In most cases where a woman has murdered someone, there is some extreme extenuating circumstance which has precipitated that event. She, for the most part, is going to be looking for some kind of escape from an intolerable situation. There's a thing that she's not going to put up with it anymore, and so if somebody had to die, then that's how that had to go. But whereas a man doesn't need that kind of enticement. A man will kill somebody on a status play or something, you know what I mean? Or it's not like for fun is not it's not an unheard of reason. Like women very rarely kill someone for fun. Men sometimes do. You know what I mean? So is it really appropriate to treat these things as the same? I am here to make the point that I don't think that these things are the same. And I don't think that in order to get our very best, most excellent, highest quality outcomes, I don't think that treating all people equally under the law is the move there. Can you believe that insane sentence that I just said? I didn't mean to arrive here. Here I am, I think about this in racial terms sometimes because I do think that races should probably be treated equally by the law. Race should not be a consideration in the value of a murder or something like that. You know what I mean? Or the quality judgment of a murder. Like, if the difference is between a black dude and a white dude, but they're the same gender and stuff, like I think that should be treated equally, and by equally I mean the same. We should treat that the same under the law, right? But I don't know that racial homogeneity is necessarily the best thing. It's certainly not on offer where I live at. I don't live in Norway or Sweden or something like that, or Japan, where, homogeneity is the norm, I live in a place where there is great diversity at all times, and they say that it's our strength. I don't necessarily know that. I don't know that it's our strength. It is our strength, but is it more strengthening than it is weakening? I don't know that. It's hard to say because it's really hard to get people on the same team when things are so divided. And, I have heard, a lot of pro-black scholarship that argues against integration, and they make great points. I don't think that it was necessarily. I don't think that you can look at outcomes in African American communities and from the 60s to now and be like, this is unambiguously better. You know what I mean? Now that integration has happened, I don't think you can do that. You can point. I think that you can point to things. You can single things out here and there and make your argument either way. But I don't think that it is as unambiguous as we would like it to have been. Now we can't go back, so the point is kind of moot. But the idea that a lot of people. Is it right or wrong? I don't know, but a lot of people argue against assimilation. There's a certain kind of cultural conservatism that is valued, and here I'm using value in the choice sense, right? Like, it's a thing that people actively choose. It's a thing that people actively prefer a lot of times, is having a certain sense of cultural belonging and cultural understanding. Like, my people are these people and we do things this kind of way, and there's a kind of rigorous adherence to those kinds of principles that that can be harmful at times. There's some people who can maybe think about things there's a sense that you can be, if you're a black person and you talk in a certain way, then you could be talking white, or I actually think that Joe Biden really you remember when Joe Biden was like, you ain't black if you don't vote for Joe Biden? And that is such a ridiculous and offensive caricature of what is actually a real phenomenon, that I think it really points to the problem of that cultural conservatism, this idea that there is a right way to be black, or whatever, insert your ethnicity here, that there's a right way to do that is kind of gross. There's a kind of jingoistic way of approaching outsiders. Xenophobic maybe is a better word there. That is kind of gross to me. And maybe it's just gross to me because I naturally straddle a lot of lines. I'm mixed race, and I don't fit easily into anyone's cultural space, anyone's cultural space. We say that. Yeah, you probably get what I'm saying, and if you don't, fuck you. So maybe I just think that because of my particular position in things. But there's really, the point I'm making here is that there is a kind of cultural conservatism that seems to be valuable. Is it high quality? Maybe. Maybe it's a thing that is worth doing. Maybe cultural preservation is a thing that is worth doing. I don't necessarily think that colorblindness is yields our best outcomes. Like the idea that colorblindness before the law seems like a good look, but if people want to hold on to their own cultures and resist mixing and assimilation and stuff like that, like, people should be able to do that, right? But then you get into anti-miscegenation shit, and that feels weird and gross. But like, I don't know. Are they low key cooking with it? Ooh, I don't know. I feel weird. I feel weird about it, but it. I don't know. There's something to it that makes sense. It makes sense that you would feel a way seeing traditions just fall by the wayside because they are old, because they don't know how to mix properly, because they don't know what to do with mixture. I don't know what to do with mixture. I don't. I'm deeply confused by this question all the time, and that's part of the reason why I am very likely to continue to revisit it a bunch on this segment of the show, Figure It Out Loud, because I haven't figured it out yet, so I need to talk it through and figure some things out with it. But I am sympathetic to the culturally conservative argument in a way that makes me uncomfortable. Like, I don't necessarily think that people should, I don't necessarily think that people should listen to my advice. But here it comes. I don't necessarily think that people should date interracially unless you have to. Unless it's a thing that is more important for whatever reason. Because partnership is already like the most difficult thing that people do. Long-term partnership is such a trial. Like, we have a lower rate than 50% of success at that. And that's just staying together. You could measure success in a lot of ways. And so if you measure success any way that includes quality in addition to just staying together, then your number plummets from even that, like, almost 50%, So it's so very difficult to do that adding a dimension of difficulty seems unnecessary to me. Unless, like me, for example, it is necessary for me because there's no way for me to date someone who is the same race as me, so I have to do it. That's why I add that caveat in there. If you have to date interracially for whatever reason, maybe you're compelled, maybe your hearts are aligned in some kind of way, or maybe there's an economic alliance you need to make or something like that. I don't know. I'm not here to yuck your yum. I'm just saying that introducing an element of difficulty seems tough, seems difficult, and I don't know that you need that. I don't know that you need that in your life. I don't know that you need that kind of difficulty. Like, my parents are different races, for example, and they never really, like, their families never really got along like that. You know what I mean? They don't know each other. They don't want to know each other. They don't my mom's side of the family is half white, half Native American. None of those folks wanted me because I'm black. There was and then my parents didn't make it very long. You know what I mean? Like they didn't do, and there's plenty of reasons for that are not racial, but that underlying racial tension is just there simmering at all times. So I don't know that it makes a better relationship necessarily. Like it can, like any other difference in people, you're necessarily in a partnership going to have differences in the people. So like any other difference, it is a surmountable difference. It can be surmounted, but it is, if you have the option of not doing it, of not adding that layer of difficulty, if you can stay within your culture and framework of traditions and conventions that are intuitively knowable to you and your family, and partner with someone else who has a similar intuitive understanding of those things, like that is gonna make for less discordant harmony than introducing that layer would. It just becomes another thing to surmount, you know? So where am I going with this? Okay, so equality. Equality, I don't think is the absolute good that we tend to put on it. And I think we would do better if we think into complementarity. I think complementarity is another good way of thinking about racial dynamics. Like, if we can't respect each other, like the idea that the way to get over racism is to make a bunch of gray brown babies, you know what I mean? Like people like me who are not any one thing, and everybody's just kind of like not black, not white, just gray in the middle somewhere. And then you remember that it's not just black and white, but also Indigenous, Native American. You could go Pacific Islander. You could do Latino. Is that different from Indigenous American? Then, you know, all the different areas of Europe. I don't think I've mentioned Asia yet. Are we talking South Asia? Are we talking East Asia? Are we talking Mongolia? Are these the same things? Who even knows, you know? Like all that sort of stuff. Each of those may have something beautiful and worthwhile to contribute to whatever we think is the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, that more beautiful world that is the exemplification of the highest quality possible. Each of those cultures, ethnic orientations, orientation as an approach to the world. Not to mention sexual orientations and all the freaky sex that people can get into and stuff like that. Like all of that probably has something useful to offer to the world. So if we collapse everything into sameness, into androgyny, does androgyny have a ethnic or racial corollary? If it does, I don't know it off the top. I don't know that sameness makes for a higher quality world. And so equality might not be the absolute good that we associate it with. All right, how long have I been going here? Oh, I've already put in an hour and a half. Okay, great, cool. Thank you so much for being here. I love you. I look forward to seeing you next time. Peace and blessings. Go to ZamboNewForm.com.